I'm trying to minimize the taxes, maximize the Bitcoin purchase. I did start buying altcoins in the beginning. And I think as time has moved on, I've moved more into Bitcoins. I've lost $1.2 million. So what we've seen recently is the decline in asset values, in digital asset values. On paper, of course, I've lost $1.2 million, but you would only lose that, of course, if I sell. The other point I want to make too for people is that when they're buying into the market, they shouldn't be using money that they need for rent. You're putting money in that's really excess money. I don't need this money. So then when you do see these market corrections and if you do go into the negatives on your portfolio, you're not worried about it because you don't have to sell the asset anyway.
Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode of Tapping Into Crypto. Today we're joined by a special guest, that is Matthew Fraser from Crypto Collective. Matthew, welcome to Tapping Into Crypto, mate.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Real pleasure to be here.
Pav, we just got a new studio here and it looks pretty schmick, but my God, Matt, I think he's giving us a run for our money.
Yeah, I want to work out how to get that Bitcoin on the wall.
Yeah,
that's right. Just one Bitcoin there. I mean, you've got to have the Bitcoin on the wall. You've got to have the Bitcoin hat. You've got to have the Bitcoin number plates. I've got those too.
That's it, man.
Then you know you're a true Bitcoiner.
Absolutely. Well, listen, how did this come about? Pav, you recently featured on Matt's podcast, Crypto Collective, and that was a good conversation.
I went on, had a chat, talked all things happening. Obviously, there's a lot happening in the market, still is today. Broke down some of the stuff happening.
It was really great having you here, Pav.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely link that in the show notes so everyone can check it out because it is a great conversation. But Matt, I want to get into your background because you know you're big on crypto. You got the Bitcoin hat on, you got the Bitcoin in the background, but we want to find out how you got to this place and sort of where you see things. So first of all, you've had quite the journey, gone from e-commerce to crypto. Can you take us back to when you first sort of left that 9-to-5 gig and moved into the entrepreneurship space and sort of how that led you down this track?
Yeah, well, I've always been self-employed. So probably for the last 30 odd years, I would say, I've been in the self-employed space. So I guess I left the 9-to-5, but you know, even having your own business, you are tied down more. I make a joke basically 9-to-5 is like a full-time holiday because once you're in small business, it's all the time. So I have personally transitioned mostly out of being so ingrained into the business, although I still have an e-commerce business where I sell medical products around the world, but it doesn't take up as much time as what it used to because it's pretty much on autopilot. But just like many Australians, you know, I was trying to find something that would free me from even the business that I was in or just create more wealth. And I discovered in about 2017, 18, I just discovered Amazon in USA. And this is before Amazon had hit Australia. And so I bought one of those online programs that we've all seen. I spent nearly $30,000 on private mentoring within that. So I was really putting a lot of money and my balls on the line. And that was without even any results. Subsequent to that, my first product I launched on Amazon, complete flop. I probably lost about $7,000 or $10,000 there. I then went to China. I'm walking around China in the Canton Fair, and I'm thinking, I've just got to find one product, right? And if you've ever been to Canton Fair, it's like a needle in a haystack, right? There's just products everywhere. And so then I had this great idea. I'm going to do kitchen knives. I start down the kitchen knife phase. That didn't even get to launch. Right? So I dumped probably another $30,000 in that. It was around this time. This is an interesting part. I started documenting my journey on social media. So I'm just on Facebook at this stage. A local person saw me on Facebook documenting my Amazon journey, which wasn't really anything, and said, hey, listen, I've got this Australian-made medical product. Can we please meet up? I meet with this guy literally in Tweed Heads, Australia. Cut a long story short, I've gone on to now do over $55 million in sales, selling in most continents around the world, and that completely changed my life. Now, it was the highest selling Amazon seller in Australia at one point, doing, you know, millions, even per month. Where crypto fits in, or even Bitcoin, I went through a period before this space, before the Amazon space, where things were financially tough for me. My restaurant had nearly gone under due to roadworks coming through. I was driving Uber. I was selling anything that was around the house. I was what I would call living on credit. Okay. And I was probably over $1 million in debt with a business that wasn't generating profit. Okay. So it was with debts to the tax office, credit card debts, you name it. And that's, I guess, what pushed me into Amazon. But I remember it was a story when I was actually driving Uber. And I was driving Uber around the Gold Coast, just trying to make ends meet. And this guy jumps into the car and he goes, "Mate, what do you think about Bitcoin?" And I went, "I wouldn't buy Bitcoin. That's ridiculous." Ridiculous.
Now look at it.
Now, what I will say to people is do not listen to the Uber driver. Okay. If the guy's driving Uber, which was me, who says don't buy Bitcoin, and maybe don't listen to him. But I don't know what ended up happening with the guy. But I remember distinctly that story because I was so adamant at the time. I was like, no, Bitcoin's bad, scam, don't do it. And then I kind of left it for probably another, I don't know, 3 or 4 years after that. And I actually didn't get into the market until 2022. So it was just after the 21 heights. By this stage, I've got millions of dollars in my bank account. I've paid off all these debts. I bought a house, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, maybe there's something to this Bitcoin, because I had a friend of mine who was talking about Bitcoin. Rather than just burying my head in the sand on this issue, I'm going to go do some research. Spoke to a friend, spoke to another friend, and ultimately landed in where I thought I would see more success, because what I'd seen from investing in myself, doing education through Amazon, I thought I'm going to invest in myself and get education in crypto, right? I was not too proud to admit that I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. I didn't know market cycles and halvings and all sorts of things. So I dropped another $20,000 on one-on-one mentorship in crypto. And the first thing they taught me was how to protect your crypto. Right, which was probably the best thing ever, because at the same time, I had another friend who was trying to educate me on crypto, and he'd put all his money into Celsius. And Celsius, as we know, didn't turn out that well. And the problem was that he didn't go and get educated. So he just thought, hey, I saw a YouTube video or two, and now I know all there is to know about crypto. I'm going to put all my money into Celsius. And subsequently, what happened with him, that was his life savings. It was about 50,000, and he lost all that money. It went to zero. And so I think just for people who are listening, the lesson is get educated. Now, whether that's you do it yourself on YouTube videos or you go and pay to be educated, I think that's probably a very wise decision to protect your crypto and have someone who's there, who's been through the ups and downs, particularly in crypto, and know that you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. So here I am. I've just bought my first lot of Bitcoin in 2022. I think I keep a ledger, of course, of all of my trades, my buys. And I think I paid about 66,000 Australian dollars. So it was pretty much near the heights of the 21. So it was coming down. And at that moment, I just developed a strategy of just continue buying. So I'd put in $10,000, then it dropped down another 10, another 20, 50, whatever it was, right? So as I had money coming in still from my Amazon e-commerce business, I was putting those profits now into Bitcoin. At the same time, though, I had also put money into the property market, and we'll come back to that in a second. So I'm also buying up commercial properties. When it relates to Bitcoin, though, I see these dips in the market that we have from time to time, and it doesn't scare me because I was buying, every time I'd buy, it'd be cheaper. Like the following week, it was cheaper, right? So I'm buying and I'm losing. I'm buying and I'm losing, all the way down to when it got down to, guys, you might correct me here, but it was around the high teens, I think, was sort of the bottoms around 23. And I just kept buying all through those bottoms, even though people were saying it could drop down to, $2,000. And then, of course, we've come back up again. I still kept buying into the market, and I did a whole bunch of other things along the way.
What a ride.
Yeah, what a ride. I mean, it's pretty unique that I guess someone is buying crypto for the first time in 2022, especially in a year where, we had FTX go down and the market was getting rinsed out.
I think it was like the Ukraine conflict even kicked off.
Yeah, what was the other thing?
Celsius, FTX.
The stable coin.
Terra Luna.
The bank.
Terra Luna.
Terra Luna. Yeah, I remember Terra Luna distinctively because I hadn't put money into Terra Luna. For some reason, I hadn't put money into Terra Luna.
Yeah.
And I saw it just plummeting. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing. And I thought, gee, it's really cheap right now.
I think a lot of people had that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not too too ashamed to say, I actually put in $1,500. I said, I just put $1,500 in. What if it comes back up again? And of course, that went to zero. So if it's falling like a knife, I think the lesson is don't buy. Maybe wait a bit longer.
So did those sort of events spook you, especially your first year buying crypto, and you didn't get spooked by anything that happened during that year?
No, I didn't. And I think when I came into the market, I was buying altcoins as well. So heavily into Bitcoin and also altcoins. Now, most of those altcoins, I think I don't even hold anymore. That's like Axie Infinity and the like, right? And I was just going on by what someone else said. Oh, the Axie Infinity, it's done really well. Oh, okay, I'll buy it. Well, it had done very well, but it wasn't going to do well again. And so there was certainly a lesson there that not every altcoin has a resurgence every cycle. There's certainly narratives in every cycle. Axie Infinity is not one that I would buy into at the moment. Maybe it'll do well. Maybe it's at the low and it'll come back again. But I think what happened though is it made me focus more so on Bitcoin. So I started going down this like Bitcoin rabbit hole. It was just constant research, buying baseball caps, of course, Yeah. And so what ended up happening was I remember talking to one of these trainers. This is back in the very beginning, right? And he said to me, all of my superannuation is in crypto, is in Bitcoin. And I was like, you're crazy. Are you serious? What? You've got to diversify. You've got to have property. And surely, I think in Australia, superannuation is like sacrilegious. Like you would just never touch it. I mean, we've only just seen through the COVID pandemic that the government allowed people to access that. And I know that some of without singling them out, people that I know did that. And I was thinking, I don't know if that's a good idea, right? Because to be able to get that money back into the system and have it compound is very, very difficult. So look, they did that. But I think because superannuation is so sacrilegious, and then you say, all of my super is in Bitcoin, it's like people's jaw are usually on the floor. Now, that's what he told me back it would have been like 2022. As time has gone on and I've become more Bitcoin religious, I would say it's practically a religion, I have now done what I said I would never do, which is I've now moved all of my superannuation into a self-managed super fund and have bought Bitcoin. Right. And I'm talking every single cent, not just a bit of it, right? So it's to the tune of it's hundreds of thousands, and I feel great about it. And I went back because people want to know, well, how is it done then? Well, what's happened? I went back and looked. So we know that Bitcoin last year did about 120% increase. And I looked about a month ago to compare it. It was up. My portfolio of just Bitcoin in the super fund was up 50%. Right. Now, when I went back and looked at the superannuation industry fund that I was in, right, to compare what did it do in 2024, it was like the best case scenario was like 8%.
Yeah.
Right. It was a joke. And so what happened from there is I realized there was actually a process to creating a self-managed super fund and then buying Bitcoin, and people were asking me about it. So what I ended up doing was creating this crypto collective online community where I actually have for free, people can go in there right now and it's documented, step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. And what to look out for and what not to look out for. Now, that said, this is not financial advice, right? I'm not saying that everyone should go out and do that. I'm in a different position to a lot of people. So when I've put all my money from super into Bitcoin, I still have other money, other properties, other things behind me. Most Australians, they only have superannuation by the time they retire. They don't, if they're lucky, they have their own home, but they don't usually have a whole stack of investment properties as well, right? So I guess you could say I've kind of hedged it. Yeah, so that's where that's come to now. I'm super, I would probably say, would that be triple maxi, guys?
I think if you look it up, that would be a triple maxi.
Yeah.
Interesting would be to sort of understand, obviously, the role that Bitcoin plays in your super portfolio. You could argue then for altcoins, do you sort of feel a reason to maybe even stay out of altcoins in your personal investing, or do you still feel like that serves a different purpose for you?
Yeah, good question, Pav. So I have 3 buckets. This is what I talk about. I have my self-managed super bucket, just Bitcoin. I then have my company, which is the one that's making the money through the medical products around the world. So that's one bucket. And then I have another entity, which is my personal bucket. So just in my personal name. When I started, I was just buying within my company. And of course, you could buy in personal, it's fine. But I guess I'm creating a reserve within my company. I guess you could say it's like I don't want to relate it to micro strategy or anything. Yeah, I mean, we have been talked about in the same sentence, but of course, if you take money out of the company to then buy Bitcoin, I've got to pay tax on that money, right? But by transferring to personal name. So I'm trying to minimize the taxes, maximize the Bitcoin purchase. Now, Pav, you talked about altcoins. I did start buying altcoins in the beginning. And I think as time has moved on, I've moved more into Bitcoin. So I think my company portfolio still holds some altcoins. Solana be my second biggest my second biggest holding, and then some other things after that. And as this time keeps going, I'm just more and more like at the moment, like for example, a few weeks ago, the market dipped, right? I didn't buy any altcoins. I'm just like more Bitcoin, more Bitcoin. Yeah, more Bitcoin. That's all I'm really thinking about. And I think in time, the altcoins will diminish more and I buy more Bitcoin. That's what I think will happen. With my personal bucket, it has a mixture, mainly Bitcoin, second Solana, and a couple of altcoins, other altcoins in there as well. As we know, though, in recent times, the altcoins have been absolutely crucified.
Yep.
Again, I'm not immune to some of these things. I've got some altcoins that I'm holding that are down 70, 80%. Right. But they're so small in the overall portfolio that I'm not even worried about it. Right. My fundamental belief is Bitcoin.
So you're just approaching it more of a calculated risk almost. Like you're happy to take on the loss for the potential return, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's a small loss for what you, it's certainly, I mean, I don't even know, I would say it's calculated. It's calculated. It's more just like throw it in and cross fingers.
So you dropped in Michael Saylor there from MicroStrategy. I'm curious. His whole approach is buy and never sell, right? Just accumulate more and more Bitcoin. Is that a similar sort of strategy for yourself? Like, do you ever take profits on some of your Bitcoin?
The answer is no. I haven't taken any profits on Bitcoin. But what I have done, because I have a community, I'm also doing experimentation. And so I come from many years ago, I come from the mortgage broking background. So lending is of a big interest to me, and I understand lending quite well. So I've even used a company, for example, like a block earner, which is in Australia, to experiment with giving them Bitcoin collateral, borrowing against it, right? And how does that work? For those listening, block earner, you can put up $100,000, for example, they'll give you 40%. So that's $40,000 in cash that they will deposit back into your bank account. The interest is roughly 10% thereabouts. It's not compounded, but it's capitalized, right? So it just sits on top of the loan. And then at the end of the 12-month period, you essentially refinance that. Now, you would have to make sure, of course, at the end of that period that your Bitcoin is worth more than the loan. Like you don't want your Bitcoin to drop from 100,000 to 40,000. But look, it's actually a very good tool. What they do along the way is they keep you in the right, I guess, loan to value ratio, or LVR is what I call it, to make sure you're within that 40 to 50% band. So you can put up more collateral if the price is dropping, because your loan's not going to drop. Okay. The loan will stay as it is plus interest. So if the value of the Bitcoin is decreasing, you're going to have to either pay down the loan or increase the Bitcoin collateral, which you could just top up, right? So I'm experimenting with those types of things. When block earner deposit the $40,000 back into your bank account, you can use that as a number of different ways. One, you can put it into your, if you're doing it in your personal name, you can go spend it on whatever you want. If it's in a business structure, you might want to use it for business capital, stock, tax debts, whatever it is. But what I did is I recycled it. So I had the $40,000 deposit, sent the money back to block earner, bought another $40,000 worth of Bitcoin. Then what happens is you put the $40,000 back up as collateral, and now you've got an extra lot of collateral, which is another percentage of the difference that you can now pull out as cash. So it's just like this. It's not a never-ending cycle that does run out eventually. And in recent times, we've now seen the price decrease. So my loan to value ratio is increasing. It may come to a point, and this is a warning to all people before they just rush out and do this, that you may need to top it up. Okay. Which means you've got to put more money in. Now, if you don't, it means you've got to sell. Okay, you've got to sell the Bitcoin and you may not want to sell it at a loss. The way to get around perhaps liquidations and things like this is you may only want to borrow up to 10%, right? You put up 100,000 capital, borrowed $10,000 at a time. But by the time that I start doing big numbers like this, I expect to have hundreds of millions in Bitcoin value anyway, right? Where I won't have to I won't be drawing out millions and millions, but maybe it's hundreds of thousands. So overall, it'll be still a low LVR.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to see like a lot more of that happening, particularly in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, because like you said, like people want to accumulate Bitcoin and they don't really want to sell it, but how can they make that work for them, right? So borrowing against it, like you said, Matt, probably a trend that we're likely to see a lot more.
Aussies are very familiar with it, property market, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It's like for like in that way.
Yeah, I think even a guy in our office did, put up his Bitcoin as collateral to borrow against for maybe his renovations. I don't think it was for his entire mortgage, but for some of his housing renovations. So yeah, look, I think you're sort of some of the early adopters of this, but it's going to become more and more common. You actually posted on your Instagram or your TikTok recently that you dropped about $1.2 million overnight, and that why you weren't worried. Can you explain like what sort of mindset you have to be in to not be affected by that?
Yeah, and I remember the post. It was a good hook.
Yeah, it was. It got me.
I've lost $1.2 million. Now, it wasn't overnight. It was over, I think, a month period, right? Yeah. And so what we've seen recently is the decline in asset values, in digital asset values. And so on paper, of course, I've lost $1.2 million. But you would only lose that, of course, if I sell, right? Physically sell the digital assets. Now, I think to your question, it's the mindset behind how can I look at that number and not freak out? Is that where you're getting to, Ted?
Yes, correct.
I think it's a couple of things. One, having conviction in the asset class. Now, I've done a lot of research. I've read all the famous books, the Bitcoin Standard, Bitcoin Evangelism, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I'm on a reading binge. Anything that's got Bitcoin written on it or something, I'm like, buy that book.
Nice.
And you have to read the Bitcoin Standard. And my goal coming into the space is I'm already thinking 20, 30, 40 years down the road, I'm expecting the price volatility up and down. So when I see that on paper, negative, 1.2 million, I'm like, that's totally fine. Keeping in mind, when I first got into the market, I was declining all the way down, right? I was buying, it was going down, buying, it was going down. So the other point I want to make too for people is that when they're buying into the market, they shouldn't be using money that they need for rent or for the mortgage payment, right? So you're putting money in that's really excess money. I don't need this money, and I don't foresee me needing this money for the next maybe 1 to 2 years. I would say at least, preferably 4 years. So then when you do see these market corrections and if you do go into the negative on your portfolio, you're not worried about it because you don't have to sell the asset anyway. I know a lot of people though, Ted, when the markets do come down, there's that pit in your stomach. You're like, oh, should I have sold? When like, and then you go through this mindset of when it goes back up again, I'm definitely selling it. Right.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take out my initial investment and then I'm good. But of course, probably what happens is you don't. It goes back up again. You forget about the dip. And there's now talk again about, no, we're actually going up another 50%. Everything's fantastic, money printers on, etc.
Yeah. Oh, the amount of times I've heard our producer Daniel talk about do that exactly what you said, where he's talking about as soon as it goes up, I'm selling for good, and then it never happens. So, you're spot on with that
all
one.
been there.
Sorry, Dan, just to call you out. No, I wanted to sort of pivot a little bit. So on your TikTok, you've got some like reaction videos, which are really engaging, so anyone can go check it out. But you react to some of like the wild claims that people are making about crypto on TikTok. Do you have any examples of like completely outrageous claims that people are making on there?
Wild claims. I mean, obviously those reaction videos are done to get reactions, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I do see some crazy things on there, I guess, but it's probably more from the altcoin space, I think. And, for example, I'll just tell you one scenario. I made some comments about XRP. Okay. Now, I used to hold XRP. I sold XRP. Now, in hindsight, I should have just kept XRP because it's been pumping recently, right? But I started to move away from things that I didn't fundamentally believe in. And I if XRP guys are watching, I'm very sorry. Please don't hurt me. But I copped so much flack
Yeah.
from the XRP army. These guys are completely engaged. And I say I'm pretty religious in Bitcoin. These guys are over the top zealots in XRP. And you say anything negative, they will come after you. And it was good for the algorithm. I would say that. It was good for the algorithm. They came in absolutely slaughtering me. I think some of the claims in XRP are maybe not going to come to fruition. But hey, who am I? Maybe they will. I don't know. So I don't have any money invested in it now. I still believe that Bitcoin is the answer. Yeah. So if people come into the space now, I always say to people, just buy Bitcoin, forget about everything else. I mean, even though I've got some other things, but I say, look, just keep it simple. Dollar cost average into Bitcoin and just forget about it.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, you don't see it too much anymore, but particularly in like 2021 where everyone was just aping into that bull market is like, when coins like Shiba and Dogecoin were coming about, and Shiba's obviously got like 10 different decimal points. So it's like, oh, if Shiba gets to just $1 and you put in $5, then you'll be a billionaire overnight. And it's like, for that to happen, Shiba would have to be like the biggest asset in the world by about tenfold, right? So it's, I think a lot more people are coming onto the fact that market caps matter, but those are some of the wilder claims I've seen made on media.
You're right, Ted. So just on that topic, you've just sparked my memory. There was one that came out. It hasn't released yet. This reaction is coming.
Oh,
stay tuned. The guy has he's like, I put 79 cents, right? 79 cents into some crypto altcoin. It went to like $875,000, and he somehow he put 79 cents in. He sold at 875, and now he's made all his money. So what I think's bad about that though is I think it's really sending a really negative message to people, particularly young people who think money is made easily. From my experience, it's very difficult to just pick an altcoin, meme coin as an example. We have this meme coin mania going on. Just put money in, sit back and watch it just ride up and become a millionaire. And I think a lot of people are losing money in that space because they don't understand that either they're getting rug pulled or that particular crypto is a scam. That's the negative side of things. And because people want a quick buck, I get it. They want to get rich quick. Someone just reached out to me recently through the social media and said, What do you mean I've got a dollar cost average into Bitcoin for like the next 10 years or 15 years, etc., to build generational wealth? That's going to take my whole life to do that. Right. So the mindset is I don't want to invest for let's say a lifetime, 20, 30 years, because that's too long. Right. I just want to show me the way to make money today. Right. Now, if we all knew that, we'd be all over it, wouldn't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's I think that's definitely a strong sort of thought for people first entering the market. They think crypto is sort of their way out of 9-to-5 work or whatever they may be doing, and they find out pretty quickly that it's not so easy. Otherwise, everyone would be making money off crypto, but a lot of people can get burnt. So 100% agree. And education, I think, is the first place to start.
All comes back to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But just on that note, you've got the Crypto Collective, which is your podcast and also your educational group. Can you tell us a little bit about that and sort of what, from your members, what are the most common questions you're getting, common misconceptions, and just sort of general sentiment at the moment?
Yeah, so well, thanks for highlighting that, Ted. The Crypto Collective is a free online group. I'm sure you put a link somewhere around. They can come in there. It's absolutely free. I go through a number of different things. One is I'm really just taking all the knowledge out of my head and putting it into a structure that people can follow. And it's, how do I buy Bitcoin? Where should I buy it? I mean, even just simple things, people don't know that they can go to SwiftX. People who are new to the market just don't know that. So they might end up on some dodgy exchange somewhere based out of Belarus or something, you know what I mean, and lose all their money. And this is how a lot of people are getting scammed. But so it's about that. It's also more so on the side of self-managed super. So because I have actually put my balls on the line, I'm not talking from a sense of, I heard about someone who did self-managed super, so here's how to do it. It's like, I've actually done it. I've been through the process. I understand the pitfalls that you need to look out for, particularly in the setup. So, for example, a lot of people think that setting up a self-managed super fund that they can take the money out and then use it willy-nilly. You can't. You've got to still keep it within the same entity. Just the simple things like that. But for someone who's new to that space, they don't understand that. I think people also didn't know that they can actually buy Bitcoin in their self-managed super fund, right? So that is like a light bulb moment for a lot of people. And once they start seeing the opportunity that Bitcoin can provide to create generational wealth and freedom for their family in the long term, then I think people will start thinking about, even if they didn't move all of their super into Bitcoin, perhaps they might consider moving half of their money into Bitcoin. I think once you do the numbers, and if you just work on, you mentioned Michael Saylor, working on his numbers of a bear case 29% compounding for the next 20 years, it's absolutely life-changing money, even if you started with something like $100,000 today, which for most people would only be a portion of their super. When I say most people who are in their 40s like me, right? It might be a portion of their self-managed super. So I guess a lot of the questions that are coming up in my community are about banking, right? How do I get money from, I've gone to the trouble of setting up a self-managed super. I've pulled it all out of the super fund. It's now sitting in my bank. I went to transfer money. Oh, I've now been flagged because I went to transfer $10,000, $20,000 and now the bank doesn't like it. So it's dealing with all of that. It's also about the setup of the super fund. Like, who should I contact to set up a self-managed super fund? This is foreign to most people. And I will admit, many, many years ago, I used to think that was pretty daunting stuff. Like, oh my God, setting up self-managed super, that seems way too hard. I'm thinking it's going to leave it in the super fund. And I think that's probably a good reason why it's probably made out to look like it's difficult. It's because the super funds, or the industry super funds, they don't want you to pull it out of their super fund. They want you to leave it in there, right? So they can keep collecting fees and keep control of your money. That said, I just want to put this out there too, Ted and Pav, that self-managed super is not for everybody. Okay. This is not for everybody. You've got to be a certain type of person in order to get through the regulations and what have you, and take possession of your future. Some people just might like the idea of, they go to work 9 to 5, they're happy with that, and the super fund has got their superannuation. They don't have to think about it, and they're happy to get 8% compounding, right? And that's totally fine. If that's for them, then leave it. But if you're sitting there and you're thinking, hey, and look, actually, I've got some numbers here actually for you guys. This is put out by the super fund industry. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this would be interesting for the listeners. And it says that in order for you to retire on what they call a comfortable income, okay, can you imagine what a comfortable income is? They're saying that it's $52,000 a year as a single person, or $73,000 as a couple, right? That's comfortable. All right. And how they classify comfortable is that's enough for you to go on an occasional dine out meal, right? Now, occasional is probably like once a month.
Yeah.
And it's also comfortable when you can go on an overseas holiday, not every year, once every 7 years. Okay. That's how they classify comfortable. And I think in Australia, most people don't think about their super or retirement. They go to work and they think the amount of money I'm earning is enough going into super so that when I retire, I can start living the life of my dreams. I'm going to have enough to pay off the house. I can go on an overseas holiday every year. I can wine and dine whenever I want. Like, that's what most people think. Okay. And it's not until, I think, for me, for example, you get to your 40s and you actually look at the numbers and then you go, oh shit, we're not going to have enough money. Yeah, we're going to have to either keep working. Most people then start thinking, I know my parents so this is nothing new. My parents had this same realization and then said, shivers, we're going to have to actually start buying property, right? So they were forced to go into investing, right? And I guess this comes back to this whole macro, which is broken money, which is a whole nother rabbit hole. But basically, the system is working against you. So how do you now get over the hurdle rate? Right? The rate in which you can actually start making money and it's not just costing you, you're just sort of plateauing, or going backwards. And what I think is that Bitcoin provides the answer to getting over the hurdle rate and creating a future for you and your family. And if you just talk about you retiring with a comfortable amount of money. So I'm talking more than comfortable retirement. You can go on 2 holidays every 7 years, right? But and if you think about it, it's actually quite depressing because let's say you retire at 65, right? So in the first 7 years, but by the time you're 72, you've gone on 1 holiday.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
When you
by
put
the
it like
time
that.
you're 80, it's another 1 holiday. And by the time you're 80, you don't want to go on holiday,
Yeah.
right? You're
Yeah.
flat out probably just getting to the bathroom.
No, when you put it like that,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty scary.
yeah, pretty scary. I might have to
Yeah.
set that self-managed super fund up. I think for me, like, and for a lot of people, there's the convenience of just having, you know, an industry super fund. You get your 8% or 10% per year. Like, what is the general upkeep and maintenance of having a self-managed super fund? Because it's my understanding that you actually can't have people, you know, facilitate it for you. It has to be purely all yourself.
Let's just look at this for a second, because this question has come up before to me, which is, and this is again is put out by the superannuation industry, which is that you've got to really have a certain amount of money in your super in order for it to be worthwhile going into a self-managed super. Okay. But the thing is though, Ted, is the industry is not comparing it against Bitcoin, right? What they're comparing it against is that you've taken it out of your industry super. You're now managing it. So you've now put your own money into some Apple and you've put it into some Meta, right? And so based on that, it's not going to be worthwhile doing unless you've got a certain threshold of money. Now, I think off the top of my head, I think the threshold is going to be over 250,000 from memory, right? So if you're someone younger who's got $50,000 in your super, and you did some you looked up the industry super fund website, they say $50,000, it's not worth it, right? Because the fees to manage your self-managed super fund are going to outweigh the returns. Okay, because the fees that you're going to have to pay every single year are basically accounting, right? Every year you've got to lodge something with your accountant in the tax office and do a report. For me, it's not that daunting because I have businesses. So I'm doing tax returns for companies and trusts and properties and what have you, like all the time, right? So this is like another thing. There's someone who's not self-employed, who's a 9 to 5. It's another like, oh my God, I've got to do a full tax return and like this auditing. Well, you don't actually do it. You have to pay someone else to do it. Right. So you just basically have to make a phone call. Okay. That's basically what you have to do.
Yeah.
But that can be daunting for people. And so I want to just put there's some numbers just out there because people are going to be absolutely blown away. Right. So they would say $100,000 if you're even a young person, right? Or even if you took out $100,000 from your existing super. So $100,000. And I always default to my compound interest calculator. Guys, you can all get this. You can download it off the App Store. I live on this thing. Let's just say that you've put $100,000 into Bitcoin. And let's use Michael Saylor's 29% compounding over the next 20 years. And I say 20 years works for me because I'm 45 now, so I'm going to be 65. And it also just coincides with Michael Saylor's prediction about the next 20 years is the gold rush period for Bitcoin. Okay. So let's just say, and let's just say you're going to contribute $1,000 a month as well, right? So that $100,000 at 29% over 20 years should end up to, with all those numbers put in, $321 million. $321 million. So if we go back to the industry super guide, it's saying that you will need about $690,000, right, to live in your retirement, to be able to go on one meal, right? Like you can leave the house once a month, right? But now we're talking 321 million. Now people are going to scoff at that, right? As soon as you say that number, that's ridiculous. That's never going to happen. But we can look back in history and we know that people that bought Bitcoin back in 2013, 2014, and if they bought just even a few, right, they're now sitting on those types of numbers if they held. So the returns are not crazy. Best case, Peter Dunworth, for example, another gentleman in Australia who is pretty prominent, he's predicting 50% compounding over the next 20 years. This is now mind-boggling stuff, right? I know Pab's going to fall off his feet, right? We're talking now, this is back to 100,000 investment, compounding at 50%, $18.4 billion. Ooh. That's crazy. Now, we should probably just end the episode there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us, mate. No, that's pretty incredible. You know, and what's more incredible is that you're 45, mate. You're looking so young. Yeah. That's the life of a Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
But
stress-free.
Yeah, that's it. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. No, it's very kind of you.
Yeah, we might leave it there, but thank you so much for coming on, Matt. Those were some really intriguing numbers that I hadn't really thought about before.
Yeah, something for us to go away and think about, especially with his red.
Yeah, the beauty of compounding interest. Hey, what do they call it? The eighth wonder of the world, I think Warren Buffett said. And we'll make sure to link all your the Crypto Collective and your podcast down below. So make sure to check out Matt and his community. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.